The snow was coming down so hard that Molly Harper could barely see 3 feet in front of her horse, but she knew the 6 riders were still behind her because she could hear their shouts cutting through the howling wind. Her fingers had gone numb inside her gloves 2 hours ago, and ice crystals clung to her eyelashes, making every blink a struggle, but she kept riding because stopping meant dying or worse. The men chasing her were railroad enforcers who had caught her stealing company documents that proved her father had been murdered, not killed in an accident like they claimed. And now, they wanted those papers back along with her silence. Molly's mare stumbled through another snowdrift, and she felt the animal's exhaustion in every labored step. They had been running since dawn, and the blizzard that rolled down from the Sierra Nevada mountains had only intensified as the day wore on. It was January 1883, and she had traveled from Sacramento to Reno, Nevada just 3 days ago, following a lead about her father's death. What she found in that railroad office had sealed her fate. The documents tucked inside her coat proved that Henry Harper had discovered the company was using substandard materials on the new rail line, cutting corners that would eventually lead to a catastrophic accident. When he threatened to go to the authorities, they silenced him permanently. The wind shrieked like a living thing, and Molly's horse whinnied in fear. Through the white curtain of snow, she could barely make out the dark shapes of pine trees. They were climbing into the mountains now, away from Reno, away from any hope of help. Her teeth chattered so violently that she bit her tongue, tasting blood. The men behind her were better equipped, with fresher horses and knowledge of these mountain passes. She was a 22-year-old seamstress from San Francisco who had never even sat a horse until a week ago. This chase should have been over hours ago. But Molly Harper had inherited her father's stubborn streak, and she would die before she let those men destroy the evidence that would clear his name and save countless lives. She urged her failing horse forward, though she had no idea where she was going anymore. The world had become nothing but white and cold and the burning in her lungs with each frozen breath. Then her horse gave out completely. The mare simply stopped, legs trembling, head hanging low. Molly dismounted on shaking legs and immediately sank up to her knees in snow. She pulled at the reins, begging the animal to move, but the horse was done. Behind her, the shouts grew closer. She could make out individual voices now, cruel laughter carried on the wind. They knew they had her. Molly abandoned the horse and stumbled forward on foot, clutching her coat tight around her. The documents crinkled against her chest, reminding her why she could not give up. She pushed through the snow, half walking, half crawling, her skirts heavy and frozen. Tears froze on her cheeks. Her vision began to blur, whether from snow or exhaustion or the early stages of freezing to death. She could not tell. She fell against something solid and realized it was a rock face. Her numb fingers found a narrow opening, barely wide enough for a person. Without thinking, driven by pure survival instinct, she squeezed herself into the gap. It was a shallow cave, hardly more than a depression in the rock, but it cut the wind and hid her from immediate view. She pressed herself as far back as she could go, making herself small, and waited. The voices grew louder. She could hear them clearly now, 6 different men calling to each other, spreading out to search. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst through her ribs. They were so close. Any moment now, one of them would peer into this crevice and find her, and it would all be over. Then she heard a different voice, deep and calm, cutting through the chaos like a knife through butter. "You men looking for something?" Molly held her breath. Through the narrow opening of her hiding place, she could make out the shape of a man on horseback, sitting easy in the saddle despite the raging blizzard. He wore a long duster coat and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, and even from this distance, she could sense the quiet authority he carried. "None of your concern, stranger," one of the railroad men shouted back. "We are looking for a fugitive, a woman. You seen anyone pass through here?" "Might have," the stranger said. His voice was measured, unhurried. "Might not have. This storm makes it hard to see much of anything." "This is railroad business," another voice snarled. "Official business. That woman stole company property and we mean to get it back." 6 armed men chasing one woman through a blizzard, the stranger observed. "Must be some mighty important property." "That is not your concern. Now move aside or we will move you." There was a long pause. Molly's whole body trembled, though whether from cold or fear, she no longer knew. She wanted to shout a warning to this foolish man who had stumbled into something that was not his fight, but her voice would not work. "I do not think I will," the stranger said finally. "This storm is getting worse. You men need to head back down the mountain before you all freeze to death out here. These passes are dangerous even in good weather. Last warning, Cowboy." "I am giving you the same courtesy," the stranger replied, and now there was steel in his voice. "Turn around and ride back to Reno. Whatever you are chasing, it is not worth dying for." The wind howled, filling the tense silence. Molly could sense the standoff, could almost feel the railroad men weighing their options. 6 against 1 should have been easy odds, but something about this stranger made them hesitate. "We will remember your face," one of them finally spat. "I am counting on it," the stranger said. She heard the sounds of horses moving, protests and curses from the men, but gradually the voices faded. The stranger had faced them down, somehow convinced them to retreat. Molly waited, not daring to move, barely daring to breathe. The cold was seeping into her bones now, and she could no longer feel her feet at all. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, she heard the stranger's voice again, much closer now. "I know you are here somewhere. They are gone, at least for now. But you need to come out before this cold kills you." Molly tried to move and found she could not. Her muscles had locked up, her body refusing to obey. She managed a weak sound, something between a whimper and a cry for help. She heard boots crunching in snow, and then a face appeared at the opening of her shelter. He was younger than his voice had suggested, probably around 27 or 28, with dark hair and eyes that were a startling shade of blue even in the gray light of the storm. His face was weathered and handsome, with a strong jaw and a day's worth of stubble. "There you are," he said, and there was relief in his voice. "Can you move?" She shook her head minutely. "All right, I am going to pull you out. This is going to hurt, but we need to get you warm." He reached in, and his hands, even through his gloves, felt like brands against her frozen skin. He pulled her carefully from the crevice, supporting her weight when her legs would not hold her. "My cabin is not far. They will not find you there." "They will not find you here," were the words she clung to as consciousness began to slip away from her. She felt herself being lifted, felt the movement of a horse beneath her, felt the solid warmth of the stranger's chest at her back as he held her in the saddle in front of him. Then there was nothing but darkness and cold. Molly woke to warmth and the smell of wood smoke. She was lying on something soft, wrapped in what felt like every blanket in existence. Her body ached in 1,000 places, and her fingers and toes burned with the particular agony of frozen flesh coming back to life. She forced her eyes open and found herself staring at rough-hewn log walls. A fireplace dominated one wall, flames crackling cheerfully. She was in a small cabin, simply furnished but solid and well-built. "Easy now," that same calm voice said, and she turned her head to see her rescuer sitting in a chair near the fire, whittling something from a piece of wood. "You have been out for about 6 hours. I was starting to worry." "Where am I?" Her voice came out as a croak. "My cabin, about 4 miles up from where I found you." He set aside his whittling and moved closer, kneeling beside the bed so his eyes were level with hers. Up close, he was even more handsome than she had first thought, with fine lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though he was not smiling now. "Name is Isaac Langford. I've got a small ranch up here, raise cattle and horses, and you are—" "Molly Harper," she said, then wondered if she should have given a false name, but something about this man made her trust him, perhaps foolishly. "Well, Miss Harper, you came mighty close to dying out there. Another hour and I would have been finding a frozen corpse instead of a living woman." He reached out and touched her forehead with the back of his hand, checking for fever. "How are you feeling?" "Like I was trampled by a horse and then left in a snowbank." The corner of his mouth twitched. "That is fairly accurate." "I need to check your fingers and toes, make sure you are not getting frostbite." "May I?" She nodded, and he gently unwrapped her hands from the blankets. Her fingers were red and swollen but intact. He examined them with a practiced eye, then did the same with her feet, his touch professional but gentle. She found herself studying him as he worked. He had strong hands, calloused from hard work, and moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. "You are lucky," he said finally, pulling the blankets back up. "Everything is going to be sore for a few days, but I do not see any serious damage. You should keep those fingers and toes." "Thank you," Molly said, and meant it with her whole heart. "You saved my life, twice. First from those men, then from the cold." Isaac shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. "Could not very well leave you out there. Want to tell me what those railroad men wanted badly enough to chase you into a blizzard?" Molly hesitated. She had learned the hard way that trusting the wrong person could be fatal. But this man had already risked his life for her, had stood against 6 armed men without knowing anything about her or her situation. She owed him the truth. "My father worked for the Central Pacific Railroad," she began. "He was a structural engineer, one of the best. Last month they told me he died in an accident at a work site, but I did not believe it. My father was careful, meticulous. He did not make mistakes." Isaac listened without interrupting, his blue eyes focused on her face. "I traveled to Reno to ask questions. I still had friends there, people who worked with my father. One of them helped me break into the company office 3 nights ago. I found documents proving that the railroad was using cheap materials on the new mountain line. My father discovered it and threatened to expose them, so they killed him and made it look like an accident." "And you took those documents," Isaac said. Molly's hand went instinctively to her chest, where the papers were still tucked inside her shirt. Somehow Isaac had managed to get her out of her frozen outer layers without touching them. "I took them. I planned to go to the territorial marshal, but they discovered the break-in faster than I expected. I barely made it out of Reno before they caught up with me. 6 men," Isaac mused. "That is a lot of resources for a simple theft. They must be worried about what you found. If this information gets out, it will ruin the company, possibly lead to criminal charges. And if another accident happens because of their cost-cutting, people will die. Dozens of people, maybe more." Isaac stood and walked to the window, looking out at the still falling snow. "That storm is going to last at least another day, maybe 2. Those men will not be able to search for you until it clears. That gives us some time to figure out what to do next. Us." Molly pushed herself up on her elbows, ignoring the protest of her aching muscles. "You have already done more than enough. This is not your fight." He turned back to her, and there was something fierce in his expression. "They made it my fight when they brought their violence into my mountains. And for what it is worth, I believe you. I have had dealings with the railroad before. They are more concerned with profit than people. You could get killed helping me." I could get killed by a mountain lion tomorrow, or thrown from my horse, or caught in an avalanche, Isaac said with a slight smile. Life is full of risks, Miss Harper. At least this one is for a good cause. Despite everything, Molly felt herself smiling back. If we are going to be partners in crime, you should probably call me Molly. Then you should call me Isaac. He moved back to the fire and ladled something from a pot hanging over the flames. You should eat. It is just venison stew, nothing fancy, but you need to get your strength back. The stew was delicious, rich and hearty, and Molly had not realized how hungry she was until she started eating. Isaac sat in his chair and resumed his whittling, giving her space but remaining close enough to help if she needed it. The cabin was cozy and warm, a stark contrast to the howling wilderness outside. She could hear the wind battering at the walls, but inside, all was calm and safe. "How long have you lived up here?" she asked between bites. "About 5 years. I used to work cattle drives down in Texas, but I got tired of the traveling, wanted a place of my own, somewhere quiet." He examined the piece of wood in his hands, which was slowly taking the shape of a horse. "Bought this land and built the cabin myself. It is not much, but it is mine." "It is wonderful," Molly said honestly. There was something appealing about the simplicity of it, the idea of building a life with your own hands in a place this beautiful. "Do you get lonely up here by yourself?" "Sometimes," Isaac admitted. "But I have got my horses and cattle, and I make it down to Reno every few weeks for supplies. I am not completely cut off from civilization. What about you? You said you are from San Francisco, born and raised." "My mother died when I was young, so it was just my father and me. He taught me to read, to question things, to stand up for what is right." Her throat tightened with grief. "He was a good man. He deserved better than what they did to him." "Then we will make sure his death means something," Isaac said firmly. "Once this storm clears, we will get you to the territorial marshal in Carson City. He is a fair man, not in the railroad's pocket. If anyone will listen to your evidence and act on it, it will be him." "Carson City is 40 miles from here," Molly protested, "and those men will be looking for me." "Then we will have to be smarter than them." Isaac set aside his whittling and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I know these mountains better than anyone. I can get you there without using the main roads. It will take longer, but it will be safer." Molly studied him in the firelight. He was serious about this, she realized. He was not just offering empty words of comfort. He genuinely intended to help her, to put himself at risk for a woman he had just met. "Why are you doing this? You do not know me. For all you know, I could be lying about everything." Isaac was quiet for a long moment. "My younger brother died 3 years ago," he said finally. "He was working on a construction project in California. The company had them working in unsafe conditions, refused to spend money on proper equipment. There was a collapse. 7 men died, including my brother. The company paid off the local officials, and nothing ever came of it." He met her eyes, and she saw old pain there and anger. "So no, I do not think you are lying, and even if I did, I would still help you. Because maybe if someone had helped those workers before the accident, my brother would still be alive." "I am so sorry," Molly said softly. "Me too." Isaac stood and moved to the window again, looking out at the storm. "You should rest more. Your body needs time to recover. We have got at least a day before we need to worry about moving." Molly wanted to argue, to say she was fine, but exhaustion was already pulling at her. The warmth of the cabin, the food in her belly, and the bone-deep weariness from her ordeal were all combining to make her eyelids heavy. "Will you wake me if something happens? I promise. Sleep now." She let herself drift off, feeling safer than she had in days. The storm raged for another full day and night. Molly spent the time recovering her strength, and Isaac spent it preparing for their journey to Carson City. He checked his weapons, cleaned and oiled his rifles and revolvers. He inventoried supplies, packed saddlebags with food and ammunition. He brought in extra firewood and tended to his animals in the small barn attached to the cabin. Molly helped where she could, though her body was still weak and sore. She mended a tear in Isaac's coat, cooked a pot of beans, and tried not to be a burden. They talked as they worked, sharing stories of their lives. She learned that Isaac had been born in Missouri, that his parents had died of cholera when he was 16, leaving him to raise his younger brother alone. He had worked as a ranch hand, a trail guide, a scout for the army, before finally saving enough money to buy this land. He was quietly competent in everything he did, and Molly found herself watching him more than she should. There was something deeply attractive about his calm confidence, the way he moved through the world without bravado or false pride. He was simply himself, solid and real and trustworthy. She caught him watching her too when he thought she was not paying attention. Their eyes would meet across the cabin, and something electric would pass between them before one of them looked away. On the second night, as they sat by the fire after supper, Isaac asked, "What will you do after?" "Assuming we get you to the marshal and he acts on your evidence, where will you go?" Molly had been trying not to think about that. "I do not know. I cannot go back to San Francisco. Even if the railroad company is brought to justice, they will have friends, people who would want revenge. I will have to start over somewhere new." "You could stay in Nevada," Isaac suggested, his tone carefully casual. "Carson City is a growing town. I am sure they could use a good seamstress." "Is that what you want, for me to stay?" The words came out before she could stop them, bolder than she intended. Isaac looked at her, really looked at her, and the intensity in his blue eyes made her breath catch. "I have been alone on this mountain for 5 years. I told myself I liked it that way. But these past 2 days, having you here, talking with you, working alongside you, it has made me realize how much I have been missing. So yes, Molly, I would like it very much if you stayed in Nevada." Her heart was pounding. "Isaac, we barely know each other. I know you are brave. I know you are willing to risk everything for what is right. I know you can cook better than me, that you are stubborn as a mule, and that you have got the most beautiful eyes I have ever seen." He smiled slightly. "That seems like a pretty good start." Molly felt herself blushing. "You think my eyes are beautiful, among other things." He reached across the space between them and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused against hers. "I know this is fast. I know the circumstances are not exactly normal, but I feel something here, Molly. Tell me you feel it too." She did. She had been fighting it, telling herself it was just gratitude or the intensity of the situation, but sitting here with her hand in his, she could not deny the truth anymore. "I feel it. I am terrified by it, but I feel it." "Then that is enough for now," Isaac said. He lifted her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "The rest we can figure out as we go." They sat like that for a long time, hands linked, watching the fire burn down to embers. Neither of them said anything more, but words were not necessary. Something had shifted between them, some unspoken agreement made. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The storm finally broke the next morning. Molly woke to silence and realized the wind had stopped. She went to the window and saw blue sky for the first time in days. The world outside was transformed into a pristine wonderland of white, snow piled in deep drifts against the cabin and weighing down the branches of pine trees. "It is beautiful," she breathed. Isaac came to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "And dangerous. That much snow will make traveling difficult, but it also means our tracks will be visible, so we need to be smart about our route." They spent the morning preparing to leave. Isaac saddled 2 horses, a sturdy bay gelding for himself and a smaller but equally tough buckskin mare for Molly. He packed their supplies carefully, distributing weight evenly, and gave Molly a spare coat and better gloves than the worn ones she had been wearing. "We will head east initially," he explained, showing her a rough map he had sketched, "away from Reno and the main roads. There is an old mining trail that is not used much anymore. It will take us up and over the ridge, then we will swing south toward Carson City. It will add a day to our journey, but it should keep us clear of anyone looking for you." "What about your ranch?" Molly asked. "Your animals?" "I've got enough feed laid in for them, and the chickens can fend for themselves for a few days. Besides, my neighbor down the mountain owes me a favor. I will leave him a note and he will check on things." Isaac strapped a rifle to his saddle and tucked 2 revolvers into his belt. "Ready." Molly took a deep breath. She was as ready as she would ever be. "Let us go." They set out into the dazzling white landscape, horses breaking trail through snow that sometimes came up to their knees. It was slow going, exhausting for both riders and animals, but Isaac seemed to know exactly where he was going. He led them up narrow defiles and along ridgelines where the wind had scoured the snow thinner. They saw no sign of other humans, just the tracks of deer and rabbit and the occasional predator. As the day wore on and the horses labored through the deep snow, Molly found herself relaxing slightly. Maybe they really would make it. Maybe Isaac's plan would work, and she would get her evidence to the authorities, and her father would receive justice, and she could start building a new life. With Isaac, perhaps. The thought made her warm despite the cold air. They stopped at midday to rest the horses and eat a quick meal of jerky and hardtack. Isaac scouted ahead on foot while Molly stayed with the animals, and when he returned, his expression was grim. "What is wrong?" she asked immediately. "There are tracks ahead." "Horses, several of them, heading in the same direction we are. They are fresh, probably from this morning." Molly felt her stomach drop. "The railroad men could be, or could just be travelers, but we cannot take chances." Isaac studied the terrain around them, calculating. "There is another route, rougher and steeper, but it will keep us clear of whoever is ahead. Are you up for it?" "I do not have much choice, do I?" His expression softened. "You always have choices, Molly. If you want to turn back, go to ground somewhere and wait this out, I will understand." "No," she said firmly. "We keep going, we finish this." Pride flashed in Isaac's eyes. "That is my girl." The new route was as difficult as he had warned. They climbed steep slopes where the horses slipped and struggled, and traversed narrow ledges where one wrong step would send them plummeting into ravines below. Molly's hands were cramped from gripping the reins so tightly, and her heart felt like it might pound out of her chest, but she kept going. Isaac was always ahead, showing the way, looking back frequently to make sure she was all right. As afternoon faded toward evening, they crested a ridge and saw smoke rising in the distance. Isaac pulled up, studying it, then cursed under his breath. "What is it?" "That is coming from the way station at Silver Creek. It is the only building for miles around." He looked back at her, his face troubled. "If that smoke is from a normal fire from travelers stopping for the night, it should be steady. But look at it. It is too dark, too thick. Something is burning that should not be." "Should we check it out?" "We should avoid it entirely," Isaac said. "But if someone is in trouble, we cannot just ride past." They approached cautiously, leaving the horses tied in a stand of trees and continuing on foot. The smell of smoke grew stronger, acrid and wrong. As they came around a bend in the trail, they saw the way station ahead, or what was left of it. The building was engulfed in flames, roof collapsed, walls crumbling, and in the snow in front of it lay 3 bodies. Molly made a sound of horror, and Isaac caught her arm, holding her back. "Stay here," Let me check. He moved forward carefully, scanning the surrounding area for danger, then knelt by the bodies. When he stood, his face was hard as stone. All shot. Probably the station keeper and 2 travelers who had the bad luck to be here. Why would anyone do this? Molly whispered, to send a message, to anyone who might be helping you. Isaac looked at her and she saw fury in his eyes. The railroad men did this. They are not just looking for you anymore. They are trying to make sure you have nowhere to run, no one to turn to. Guilt crashed over Molly like a wave. This is my fault. These people died because of me. No. Isaac's voice was sharp. They died because evil men decided murder was easier than accountability. That is not on you, Molly. That is on them. He took her shoulders, making her look at him. We are going to stop them. We are going to make sure your evidence reaches the right people and these deaths will not be in vain. But we need to move. If they are burning buildings and killing witnesses, they are getting desperate. Desperate men are dangerous. They returned to their horses and rode hard into the gathering darkness, putting distance between themselves and the burning way station. Isaac pushed them longer than was safe, not stopping until they reached a small cave he knew, tucked into the side of a cliff. It was cramped and cold, but it was shelter and it was hidden. They did not risk a fire. They ate cold food and huddled together for warmth, wrapped in blankets, listening to the night sounds of the wilderness. Molly could not stop shaking, and it had nothing to do with the temperature. I keep seeing their faces, she whispered. Those people at the way station. They did not even know who I was, and they died anyway. Isaac's arm tightened around her. I know. I am sorry you had to see that. How do you do it? How do you stay calm when everything is falling apart? I do not always, Isaac admitted. But I learned a long time ago that panic does not help anyone. You do what needs doing, one step at a time, and you do not let yourself think too much about what might go wrong. He tilted her chin up so she was looking at him. Even in the darkness of the cave, she could make out the outline of his face. We are going to make it, Molly, I promise you that. You cannot promise that. Watch me. And then he kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, giving her room to pull away if she wanted to. But Molly did not want to pull away. She wanted to fall into this moment, into the warmth and strength and unexpected tenderness of this man who had appeared in her life, like an answer to a prayer she had not known she was making. She kissed him back, fingers curling into the front of his shirt, and felt him respond, deepening the kiss, one hand coming up to cup the back of her head. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Isaac rested his forehead against hers. I have been wanting to do that since I pulled you out of that crevice. You have terrible timing, Molly said, but she was smiling. Maybe. Or maybe it is perfect timing. Life is uncertain, Molly. I have learned that the hard way. So when something feels right, when someone feels right, you do not waste time. He kissed her again, softer this time. I am falling in love with you. I know it is too soon to say that, but there it is. I needed you to know. Molly's heart felt like it might burst. Isaac, I am falling for you too. But I am scared. What if something happens to you because of me? I could not bear it. Nothing is going to happen to me, and nothing is going to happen to you. We are going to get through this together, and then we are going to have the rest of our lives to figure out what this is between us. He settled her more comfortably against his chest, wrapping the blankets around them both. Sleep now. We have got a long ride ahead of us tomorrow. Molly closed her eyes, listening to the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear, and let herself believe him. Just for tonight, she would believe that everything would be all right. They woke before dawn and were back on the trail as soon as there was enough light to see by. The terrain grew less mountainous as they descended toward the valley where Carson City lay. By midday, they could see the town in the distance, A collection of buildings spread across the landscape, smoke rising from dozens of chimneys. "Almost there," Isaac said, and Molly could hear the relief in his voice, but relief was premature. As they rounded a bend in the trail, 6 horsemen appeared ahead of them, blocking the path. The railroad enforcers, looking worse for wear after days in the cold, but very much alive and very much armed. "End of the line, Miss Harper," the leader called out. He was a big man with a scarred face and cruel eyes. "You have led us on quite a chase, but it is over now. Hand over those documents and maybe we will let you and your cowboy friend ride away." Isaac's hand moved toward his rifle, but 6 guns were already trained on them. "You are outnumbered and outgunned," Scarface said. "Do not be stupid." "Let her go," Isaac said, his voice steady despite the situation. "This is between you and her. I am just a guide. I do not even know what is in those papers. Nice try, but we saw you at the way station." "Well, we saw what was left of it." The man's smile was vicious. "You are in this deep, cowboy, too deep to walk away." Molly's mind raced. They were trapped and there was no way out that she could see. She could feel the weight of the documents against her chest, her father's last gift to the world. She could not let these men destroy them. "I will give you the papers," she said suddenly. "But you have to let Isaac go first. He rides away and then you get what you want." "Molly, no," Isaac said sharply. "Those are my terms," she continued, ignoring him. "Let him go and this ends peacefully." Scarface considered it, then shrugged. "Fine. The cowboy rides away, you give us the papers, and everyone goes home happy. Well, most everyone." The threat in those last words was clear. They were going to kill her as soon as they had the documents. But at least Isaac would be safe. That was all that mattered. "Molly, I am not leaving you," Isaac said, his voice low and fierce. "You do not have a choice. Please, Isaac, live. For both of us." Before he could respond, the sound of hoofbeats filled the air. More riders were coming, at least a dozen of them, appearing from multiple directions at once. For a heart-stopping moment, Molly thought it was more railroad men, that they were truly finished. But then she saw the badges glinting on their chests. "United States Marshal Service," a loud voice announced. "Drop your weapons, all of you." The railroad men looked around wildly, realizing they were now the ones surrounded. Scarface started to raise his gun, and one of the marshals shot it out of his hand. "I said drop them. Next one goes through your skull." Slowly, reluctantly, the 6 enforcers dismounted and dropped their weapons. The marshals moved in efficiently, rounding them up, securing their hands with iron shackles. A man rode forward, older than the others, with gray in his beard and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You must be Miss Molly Harper. I am Marshal James Kendrick. We have been looking for you." Molly was too stunned to speak. Isaac found his voice first. "How did you find us?" "The territorial governor received a telegram 3 days ago from a lawyer in San Francisco. Seems Miss Harper was smart enough to send a copy of her evidence to someone she trusted before she came to Nevada. When the lawyer did not hear from her, he got worried and contacted the authorities." Kendrick looked at Molly with something like respect. "You have caused quite a stir, young lady. Once we knew what we were looking for, it was not hard to track the railroad's hired guns. We have been following them, waiting for them to lead us to you." "The way station," Molly managed. "They killed people at Silver Creek. We know. We found the bodies yesterday. These men will hang for those murders along with everything else." Kendrick dismounted and approached Molly. "I need you to come back to Carson City with us. Give a formal statement, turn over your evidence. The governor wants to personally ensure your safety." "What about my father?" Molly asked, her voice breaking. "Will there be justice for him?" "There will be justice for all of it," Kendrick promised. "The railroad company is about to find out that they are not above the law. The next few hours passed in a blur. They rode to Carson City with the marshal escort, the captured railroad men tied to their horses and sullenly silent. Molly gave her statement at the marshal's office, turned over her father's documents, and answered what felt like 1,000 questions. Isaac stayed by her side through all of it, a steady presence when everything else felt overwhelming. By evening, it was done. The documents were in official hands, the murderers were in jail, and word was being sent by telegraph to authorities in Sacramento and San Francisco. The railroad company would face criminal investigation. Her father's name would be cleared. Molly sat in the small hotel room the territorial government had provided for her and tried to process that it was really over. She had done it. She had survived, and she had made them pay. There was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Isaac standing there, hat in his hands, looking suddenly unsure of himself. "Hi," he said. "Hi." She stepped back, letting him in. "I wanted to thank you for everything. I would not be alive if not for you. You give yourself too little credit. You are the bravest person I have ever met." Isaac turned his hat in his hands, not quite meeting her eyes. "So, I guess you will be heading back to San Francisco now." "Actually, no. I thought I might stay in Nevada for a while." Molly took a step closer to him. "I was thinking Carson City could use a good seamstress, and I heard there is a handsome rancher up in the mountains who might appreciate some company from time to time." Isaac's face broke into a wide smile. "Is that so?" "That is so." Molly reached up and took his face in her hands. "I meant what I said in that cave, Isaac. I am falling in love with you. Maybe I already have fallen. It is fast and it is crazy, but it is also the most real thing I have ever felt." "Then stay," Isaac said simply. "Not just in Nevada. Stay with me. Come back to the ranch, build a life there." "With me?" He caught her hands in his. "Marry me, Molly," her breath caught. "Isaac, we have known each other less than a week." "I know, and I do not care. I spent 5 years alone on that mountain, convincing myself I was content. Then you came into my life, and suddenly I cannot imagine it without you." His blue eyes were intense, burning with emotion. "I love you, Molly Harper. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to build a home with you, raise children with you, grow old with you. So yes, it is fast, but sometimes you just know, and I know." Tears were streaming down Molly's face, but she was smiling. "Yes, yes, Isaac, I will marry you." He kissed her then, deep and fierce and full of promise. When they broke apart, they were both laughing, giddy with joy and relief, and the sheer improbability of having found each other in the midst of chaos. "We should probably court properly for at least a little while," Molly said. "People will talk. Let them talk. But all right, if it makes you feel better, we will do this the traditional way. I will court you, take you to dinners, walk you home properly. And then in a few months, we will get married and scandalize everyone with how quickly it happened." "Sounds perfect." They stood there in the small hotel room, wrapped in each other's arms, and Molly felt something she had not felt since her father's death. She felt hope. She felt joy. She felt like the future, which had seemed so dark and uncertain just days ago, was now bright with possibility. Isaac courted her for 3 months, and they were the happiest 3 months of Molly's life. He came down from his ranch every week, bringing her flowers, taking her to restaurants and social events, walking her along the Carson River at sunset. He introduced her to his neighbors, his friends, the people who made up his community in the mountains. She set up a small seamstress shop in Carson City and quickly built a clientele, her skill with a needle earning her respect and steady income. The railroad investigation progressed. The 6 hired guns were tried and convicted, 3 of them hanging for the murders at Silver Creek. The company executives were brought up on charges of fraud, bribery, and conspiracy, to commit murder. Molly had to testify twice, and both times Isaac sat in the courtroom, his presence giving her the strength to face her father's killers. When the guilty verdicts came down, Molly went to her father's grave, newly marked with a proper headstone that she had commissioned. She knelt in the grass and told him that justice had been served, that his death had not been in vain, that the railroad line would be rebuilt to proper standards and countless lives would be saved because of his courage. She felt Isaac's hand on her shoulder and looked up to find him standing behind her, offering silent support as always. "He would have liked you," she said. "I wish I could have met him." "Me too." Molly stood and took Isaac's hand. "But I think he would be happy that I found you. That I am not alone." "You will never be alone again," Isaac promised. "Not as long as I am breathing." They were married in June of 1883 in a small church in Carson City with half the town in attendance. Molly wore a dress she had sewn herself, white silk with delicate embroidery, and Isaac wore a new suit that made him look uncomfortable but devastatingly handsome. Marshall Kendrick walked her down the aisle, having become something of a father figure to her over the past months. When Isaac slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her as his wife, Molly felt her heart swell with so much love she thought it might burst. This man, this strong, gentle, brave man was hers, and she was his. They had found each other in the midst of darkness and danger, and they had chosen each other despite all the odds. Their life on the ranch was everything Molly had dreamed of and more. The cabin that had seemed small now felt cozy and perfect, their sanctuary from the world. They worked side by side, tending cattle and horses, expanding the herd, building on to the cabin to make more space. Molly kept her seamstress business, riding down to Carson City twice a month to deliver finished work and take new commissions. Isaac built her a proper workroom, with good light and space for her fabrics and thread. Their first winter together was harsh, with blizzards even worse than the one that had brought them together. But they weathered it easily, comfortable in their home, warming each other through the long nights. They talked for hours, learning every detail of each other's pasts, sharing dreams for the future. They made love with passion and tenderness, discovering each other's bodies, learning what brought pleasure and joy. In the spring of 1884, Molly discovered she was pregnant. Isaac was overjoyed, treating her like precious glass, though she laughed and told him she was not fragile. Their son was born in December, healthy and loud and perfect. They named him Henry after her father, and Molly cried happy tears as she held him for the first time. Isaac was a wonderful father, patient and gentle and devoted. He sang to Henry in a deep voice that soothed the baby to sleep, taught him to walk holding his little hands, carved toys from wood during the long winter evenings. Watching him with their son, Molly fell in love with him all over again. 2 years later, their daughter arrived, a tiny thing with her mother's dark hair and her father's blue eyes. They named her Grace, and she lived up to her name, bringing light and laughter into their home. Henry adored his little sister, protective and sweet, already showing signs of his father's steady temperament. The years flowed by, each one bringing new joys and challenges. The ranch prospered. Molly's seamstress business grew. Their children grew strong and healthy, learning to ride horses, helping with chores, attending the small school that had been built in a nearby settlement. They made friends among the other ranching families, became part of a community, put down roots deep into the Nevada soil. Sometimes in quiet moments, Molly would think back to that terrible week when she fled through the blizzard, certain she was going to die. She thought about the fear and desperation, the cold that had seeped into her very bones. And then she thought about the moment Isaac had appeared, solid and real and utterly unexpected. her guardian angel in a duster coat who had looked at her and seen not a problem but a person worth saving. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac would ask, finding her lost in thought. "How lucky I am," she would say, and it was the truth. How lucky we both are. In 1895, when their son was 11 and their daughter 9, the railroad company that had killed Molly's father was finally dissolved, broken up and sold for parts. The investigation that Molly's evidence had sparked eventually uncovered a web of corruption that reached all the way to Sacramento. The people responsible were brought to justice, and new regulations were put in place to ensure such cost-cutting could never again put lives at risk. Marshal Kendrick, now retired, came to visit and told them the news. He stayed for dinner, playing with the children and sharing stories from his years as a lawman. Before he left, he pulled Molly aside. "Your father would be proud of you," he said. "Not just for what you did back then, but for the life you have built, for the family you have raised. That is the best kind of justice. Living well, loving fully, refusing to let the darkness win." "Thank you," Molly said, hugging him, "for everything." That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Molly and Isaac sat on their porch, watching the stars wheel overhead. The night was clear and cold, crisp with the promise of autumn. Isaac's arm was around her shoulders and she leaned into his warmth, comfortable and content. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Taking me in that day, your life would have been simpler without me." Isaac laughed softly. "Simpler maybe, but not better, never better." He kissed the top of her head. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Molly Langford. You and those two troublemakers sleeping inside. They get the trouble making from you. They absolutely do not. Henry climbs everything, just like his mother used to climb onto her father's workbenches, and Grace has your stubborn streak. I am not stubborn. I am determined. Keep telling yourself that." Isaac pulled her closer. "I love you. Have I mentioned that today? Only about a dozen times, but I do not mind hearing it again." "I love you," he said, turning to look at her, his blue eyes as intense now as they had been the day they met. "I will love you every day for the rest of my life, and it still will not be enough time." Molly kissed him, soft and sweet and full of all the emotion that still, after all these years, sometimes overwhelmed her. "I love you too, my rescuer, my partner, my home." They sat together under the stars, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. The wind whispered through the pines, carrying the scent of snow from the high peaks, and inside the cabin their children slept peacefully, safe and loved. Molly thought about that desperate girl fleeing through the blizzard, thought about those 6 men hunting her, thought about how close she had come to losing everything. And then she thought about the miracle of this life she had now, the impossible gift of love that had come from those dark days. She leaned against Isaac's shoulder and smiled, utterly content. She had survived. She had found justice for her father. And most importantly, she had found a love that would last forever, born in the snow and wind of a Nevada winter, forged in danger and sealed with promises that neither of them had ever broken. In the mountains of Nevada, on a ranch built by their own hands, Isaac and Molly Langford grew old together. They watched their children grow and marry and have children of their own. They celebrated grandchildren and anniversaries and all the small precious moments that make up a life well lived. Henry became a civil engineer like his grandfather, working to ensure that buildings and bridges and rail lines were constructed safely and with integrity. Grace became a teacher, carrying on her grandmother's legacy of standing up for what was right and never backing down from a challenge. Both of them knew the story of how their parents met, of the blizzard and the chase and the cowboy who had said, "They will not find you here. and had kept that promise in every way that mattered. And when Isaac and Molly were very old, when their hair had gone white and their hands were gnarled with arthritis, but still reached for each other every morning, they would sit on that same porch and watch the sun set over the mountains they had always called home. No regrets. Isaac would ask, as he had asked 1,000 times before. Not a single one, Molly would answer, as she always did. Not one. And in the end, that was all that mattered. They had lived fully. They had loved deeply. They had turned a moment of terror into a lifetime of joy. The blizzard that had nearly killed Molly Harper had instead brought her the greatest gift of her life. And when she finally closed her eyes for the last time, many years later, with Isaac's hand in hers and her children surrounding her, her last thought was one of profound gratitude. For the storm, for the chase, for the cowboy who had found her when she needed him most, for every single moment of the beautiful, impossible, perfect life they had built together. Their love story became legend in those Nevada mountains, passed down through generations. The tale of the brave woman who fought for justice, and the cowboy who saved her, of how love could bloom even in the harshest winter, of how two souls could find each other against impossible odds and build something that would last forever. And high in those mountains, in a small cemetery overlooking the valley, two headstones stood side by side. Isaac Langford and Molly Langford, beloved husband and wife, together in death as they had been in life. Their legacy lived on in their descendants, in the ranch that still bore the family name, in the countless lives that had been saved because one woman refused to let injustice stand. Their story ended where it began, in the snow and wind of the Nevada mountains, with a promise kept and a love that time could never diminish. It was a story of courage and compassion, of sacrifice and devotion, of two people who found each other in the darkness and chose to walk into the light together, hand in hand, heart to heart, for all the days of their lives.